My niece threw my Christmas gift at me and my family laughed until I stood up Reddit stories. She mocked the gift in front of everyone while the room cheered, and my son flinched like it hit him instead. That moment quietly changed everything I was willing to tolerate. Hi, I'm Arnold, 39, dentist, single dad, and apparently the only person in my family who thought Christmas was about kindness and not full-contact emotional dodgeball. Last year, my entire life tilted on its axis in the exact moment my teenage niece looked at the gift I'd spent weeks researching, buying, wrapping, and making sure would make her feel special, an iPad mini, and then laughed, tossed it at my chest, and announced to the entire room, "That's all I get?" I swear the world went quiet for half a second. Not because anyone was shocked. Oh no, they thought it was hilarious. My sister smirked like her daughter had just performed stand-up. My mom sipped her mimosa as if the whole scene were cute. And my dad, leaning back like a retired king in his recliner, muttered, "She's just being honest." As though honesty naturally comes packaged with rudeness and airborne electronics. But the person who mattered, the person whose face actually rewired something inside my chest, was Ethan. My kid. My quiet, gentle, 8-year-old son who flinched like the iPad had hit him instead of me. He sat cross-legged near the tree with a little hand-cut snowflake he'd made for my mom, and I watched his fingers tighten around the paper like he already knew it wasn't welcome. That was the moment I felt the floor shift. Not because I was embarrassed, but because he was. So I stood up without saying a word. No dramatics. No yelling. No big Christmas speech. I just walked over to the pile of 16 carefully wrapped gifts I'd brought. 16. Because apparently in my family, generosity was a competitive sport, and started collecting them. My sister blinked like she had never seen consequences before. My dad tried yelling, "Don't be dramatic," which would have had more weight if he weren't the same man who once demanded I call customer service for him because his toaster stopped toasting evenly. But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even turn around fully. I just said, calm as a surgeon, "I'm not. But tomorrow at 9 a.m., I'm updating the mortgage autopay." That was the moment the laughter died. I swear the heater kicked on just to fill the silence. Ethan walked to me without being asked, slipped his hand into mine, and we left. And as the doors shut behind us, something inside me clicked into place, the kind of internal lock you don't reopen once it's closed. Because it wasn't the iPad. It wasn't the room's laughter. It wasn't even the years of financial acrobatics I had been doing to hold my parents' life together. It was my son's expression. That small, wounded attempt to hide that he felt less than. And right then, walking him to the car in the cold December air, I realized something painfully simple. I wasn't going to let him grow up thinking love required being small. The house was quiet that night, the kind of quiet that feels like it's holding its breath. Ethan sat at the kitchen island in his Christmas sweater, picking at grilled cheese, the edges of his little paper snowflake frayed from being held too tightly. He finally looked up at me with those big, earnest eyes and asked, "Did I do something wrong?" That question nearly folded me in half. Kids don't care about mortgages or family politics. They care about tone, faces, the air in the room. And the air in that room had told him he didn't belong. "You didn't do anything wrong," I told him. I tried to say it lightly, but my voice came out tight. He nodded, but there was this tiny hesitation, like he wanted to believe me but wasn't sure he could. So after I tucked him into bed, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, the glow of the screen reflecting off the half-unwrapped ornament he'd brought home from school. My bank login was already muscle memory. Years of patching holes in my parents' financial ship had trained me well. There it was. Mortgage autopay. $1,842.17. The payment I'd been covering every month since my dad retired, which was a generous way of saying, quit before they could fire him. For years I convinced myself it was temporary. For years they convinced me it was owed. I stared at the screen, and for the first time, none of the old guilt rose up. Just clarity. Click. Edit. Cancel autopay. A little warning popped up. This may result in missed payments. As if the bank were worried about my parents in a way they'd never worried about me. I hit confirm anyway. Then I drained the so-called family emergency account I'd set up, the one everyone used except me, and quietly closed it. No angry messages. No manifesto. Just a boundary, finally put into action. My alarm went off the next morning at 8:45. By 9:07, my phone was ringing. Dad. Of course. I answered like I'd been expecting a normal conversation. What did you do? He snapped, skipping hello entirely. I cancelled the autopay. Dead silence. Then, you can't do that. The absurdity nearly made me laugh. He said it like I'd cancelled oxygen. It's your mortgage, I said. You can pay it. Mom was in the background, full panic mode. Tell him to fix it. Tell him he can't just stop. Dad tried reasoning, which for him meant talking slower but not softer. You're upset. Fine. But you don't punish us over a kid's comment. Punish. Amazing how quickly people reframe your boundaries as violence. It's been years, I said. Not one comment. Stop being dramatic. There it was again. The family motto. I looked at the small Christmas tree in our living room, the one Ethan and I decorated ourselves with paper ornaments, and a star made out of cardboard. That tiny, lopsided tree had more warmth than a decade of holidays at my parents' house. I'm not being dramatic, I told him. I'm being done. Dad sputtered. Mom tried a guilt tremble. They both kept talking like I was canceling a magazine subscription, not a decade of financial codependence. But I didn't waver. Because while they were panicking about bills, I was thinking about my son, my kid who whispered, I don't need much. Every time his cousins got what he didn't. My kid who had spent years shrinking so the adults around him didn't have to grow. They could figure out their mortgage. I was figuring out how to build a life where Ethan never again had to wonder whether he was wanted. Kara showed up 2 days later, not with an apology, not with humility, not even with an attempt at pretending she cared about Ethan. No. She barged into my dental office like she was storming a castle she forgot she didn't own. My receptionist paged me with the kind of voice people use when there's a raccoon in the lobby. I stepped into the waiting room, and there was my sister, arms crossed, jaw clenched, breathing like she'd sprinted from her car even though she absolutely parked illegally in the fire lane. We're talking, she said, marching straight past my stunned patients. I led her into my office and shut the door, mostly to protect the public. She didn't sit. So you're really doing this? You're really cutting them off over a teenager saying she didn't like her gift? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't match her energy. I had learned the day I became a parent that if you want control, don't compete with chaos. That's not what happened, I said. She didn't throw it that hard. She was joking. She's dramatic. She didn't mean anything by it. Every excuse came out rapid fire, like she'd been rehearsing them in the mirror. I let her finish. Then I said, Ethan was sitting right there. And everyone laughed. She rolled her eyes, which was remarkable because I didn't think she could look more dismissive than she'd already perfected over the years. Oh my God, Arnold. He'll forget. That was the moment the ground shifted under her, not me. Kids don't forget feelings, I said. He remembers how rooms make him feel. He remembers who protects him. For a second, just a second, I saw something flicker in her expression. Recognition. Guilt. The truth. But she swallowed it like a pill she refused to digest. So what? She snapped. You're fine letting Mom and Dad lose their house? I almost asked. What exactly did they do to earn me keeping it? But I kept it steady. I've supported them for years, I said. And they've treated Ethan like he's optional. Kara's face pinched. She looked away, which told me everything. She'd seen it too. Then came the real reason she was there. The quiet part finally said out loud. So what am I supposed to do when I need help? Not, how do we fix this? Not. I'm sorry. Not. I didn't realize how they treated Ethan. Just, who's going to pay for my life now? You budget, I said. Like every other adult. Her face went red with a heat I'd only ever seen on overinflated balloons seconds before they pop. You're unbelievable. I opened the office door. We're done. She stood there waiting for me to soften, to cave, to fall back into the family role I played for a decade. I didn't. She left. And the moment the door clicked shut, I felt a strange, grounding clarity settle over me, the kind of clarity people talk about when they finally hear the truth without distortion. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the family ATM. I wasn't the peacekeeper. I wasn't the designated stability provider. I was Ethan's father first. And everything after that came second. The fallout didn't hit all at once. It rolled in slowly, like weather, first a drizzle of guilt, then a downpour of pressure, and finally a full-blown storm of, "How dare you stop funding our lives?" My dad called daily. Not to talk. Not to understand. Just to demand. Mortgage didn't go through. Fix it. You made your mother cry. This is embarrassing for us. Us. Not once did he ask how Ethan was feeling. Not once did he mention what actually started this. My mom's voicemails were softer, at least in tone. But every sentence was a hook baited with obligation. We're family. Family helps each other. Your father is very stressed. His blood pressure. Amazing how a medical issue only mattered when they wanted money. I didn't respond. Not because I was being cruel, but because I'd already said everything that needed saying. Boundaries stop working the second you start renegotiating them. The only person I did explain things to was Ethan. One night, while we brushed our teeth, he looked at me in the mirror and asked, "Are we going to Grandma's again?" Simple question. Heavy answer. "Not for a while," I said. He paused mid-brush. "Did they not want us there?" That one hit harder than the iPad, harder than the laughter, harder than expensive gifts flying through the air like rejection wrapped in shiny paper. I put my hand on his shoulder. "You didn't do anything wrong," I said. "Some people don't know how to be kind, and I'm not taking you places where you feel bad." He nodded slowly. Then he surprised me. "Can we do Christmas at home next year?" he asked. "With pancakes?" My throat tightened, but I smiled. "With pancakes," I said. January brought consequences, not for me, but for the people who had built their lives on the assumption that I would pay for the holes in theirs. Dad missed the first mortgage payment. And the second. Not because he couldn't scrape money together, he could. But because he was stubborn, waiting for me to swoop in and rescue him like always. Instead, he got a late notice. Then another. Then a letter with bold red text that was far more polite than he'd ever been to me. He called again, voice tight with anger he thought he could weaponize. "You're really going to let this happen? You're really going to let your own mortgage happen?" I corrected. He cursed under his breath, loud enough for me to hear. I didn't react. My aunt tried mediating next, which is family code for convince the financially stable one to fold. "Your parents are so stressed," she said. "Your father can't sleep. Your mother is a wreck." "And Ethan?" I asked. "What about him?" Silence. Then she said, "I hope you can live with yourself." I looked across the room, where Ethan was building a Lego spaceship with the kind of focus only kids have. "I can't," I said. And I hung up. By spring, reality hit them harder than anything I could have said. They refinanced the mortgage. They tightened expenses. They asked Kara for help. She asked our uncle. He said no. They finally did what adults do. They figured it out without me. Not gracefully. Not gratefully. But they did it. And that was the shift, maybe the biggest one. They learned they could live without my money. They just didn't like the version of life that required effort. But meanwhile, on my side of the fence, the air in my home got lighter. Ethan laughed more. I slept better. We started building something neither of us realized we'd been missing. A life that wasn't funded by resentment and held together by obligation. A life just for us. Spring was when the apologies began, not real apologies, not the kind that repair anything. These were strategic apologies. Apologies shaped like fishing lines, cast out to see if they could reel the money back in. My mom showed up first. I saw her through the front window, standing on my porch holding a grocery store pie with the same expression she used when she needed someone to move her furniture, sad, hopeful, and already rehearsing the guilt trip monologue. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me, blocking her view into the house. She blinked, startled that I hadn't immediately invited her into my space like always. "Can we talk?" she asked. I nodded but didn't step aside. She looked down at the pie as if that alone should have earned her access. "I'm sorry about Christmas," she said quickly, her voice already wobbling in the performative way people use when they want to be forgiven, not accountable. "It got out of hand." I waited. She added, "Your niece was rude." Still waiting. "And we didn't mean to hurt Ethan." There it was, the first time she'd said his name in months. And even then, it came out like she was reciting a line someone forced her to memorize. "Okay," I said. She blinked. "Just okay? What do you want me to say?" "I don't want anything," I told her. "I just don't want a repeat." Her face tightened. "Arnold, you're being cold." "I'm being safe," I said. "For my son." She bristled, like Ethan being my priority was somehow an accusation. "So what, are you punishing us forever?" "This isn't punishment," I said. "This is the consequence of how you treated him." She inhaled sharply, eyes watery, lips trembling in that wounded mother performance she'd perfected. "Your father is heartbroken," she whispered. I didn't doubt that he was upset. I doubted he was upset for the right reasons. "I won't fund a family my kid isn't part of," I told her. "That's the boundary." Her gaze drifted past me, toward the backyard. Through the sliver of window in the door, she saw Ethan tossing a tennis ball for our dog, laughing, a sound so natural and free that it vibrated in the air. And for the first time, my mother's face cracked. Not anger. Not guilt. Shame. Barely there, but unmistakable. Like she suddenly realized she'd missed something precious, and not because she wanted to cherish it, but because she wanted access to it again. "Can I say hi to him?" she asked. I thought about it carefully, weighing not her feelings, but Ethan's. "Not today," I said. She recoiled like I'd slapped her. But I didn't feel guilty, not even a flicker, because protecting a child's emotional safety isn't cruelty. It's parenting. She left the pie on my porch. I tossed it out after she drove away. Not dramatically. Simply and quietly, the way you discard something that doesn't belong in your home anymore. The following week, my voicemail had fewer messages. My text notifications slowed. Silence began creeping in, not cold, not heavy, but peaceful. My house felt like it finally belonged to the people who lived in it. And the strangest thing happened. Without the noise of their expectations, I suddenly had room to hear my own thoughts, and my son's laughter. We were building a different life, one unburdened by someone else's emergencies. And for the first time in years, I felt like I had stepped back into my own spine. Like I'd returned to myself. Summer arrived quietly, almost shyly, like it wasn't sure if it was welcome. The house felt different now, lighter, less crowded by the invisible weight of expectations I used to lug around like a second job. Ethan and I had settled into a rhythm that felt ours. Saturday mornings became pancake rituals. Evenings turned into sketchbook sessions. And without the looming obligation of someone else's mortgage in the back of my mind, I found I could actually exhale fully. Meanwhile, my family, well, they were busy learning a truth they'd avoided for years, that they could survive without me. They just preferred not to. I heard updates through the family grapevine. My aunt's cautious texts. My cousin Leah's honest ones. She was the only person who'd reached out without demanding anything. They refinanced, she told me one day. Your dad's complaining, but they'll be fine. Fine. A word I had never been allowed to be while bankrolling them. I kept my distance. Not out of spite, but out of strategy. Peace isn't something you invite chaos into. But then something unexpected happened. Ethan asked a question that stopped me mid-step in the hallway. Dad, he said one evening, lying on the floor coloring with his dog stretched across his legs. Do Grandma and Grandpa hate me? My heart dropped straight through the floor. No, I said immediately, kneeling beside him. They don't hate you. They just forgot how to treat people the way they should. He frowned a little, coloring the corner of a spaceship. But they're adults. Adults should know. If only. You're right, I said. Adults should know. But sometimes they don't learn until someone says stop. Is that what you did? He asked quietly. I nodded. Yeah. That's exactly what I did. He didn't say anything for a while. Just colored. And then he surprised me again. I like our house better, he said. It feels nicer. Why do you think that is? I asked. He shrugged in that little kid big truth way. Because no one here laughs when I'm sad. That sentence cracked something inside me and let the light in. I put my hand on his back. I promise you, I said, this house will always be a place where you don't have to be small. He nodded, satisfied, and returned to coloring. Meanwhile, the outside world kept spinning. My parents kept stewing. Kara kept texting our cousins her embellished version of events, painting me as dramatic, ungrateful, cruel, the villain in the family group chat they forgot I wasn't in anymore. And yet, every lie she told just made the truth stand taller. They weren't angry that I left. They were angry that they couldn't drag me back with the same hooks they'd always used. Guilt. Obligation. Fear. Tradition. Money. None of the old tools worked anymore. By late summer, the silence from them felt less like a cold shoulder and more like a closed door. One I had closed. One I wasn't sure I ever wanted to open again. But the universe has a sense of humor about timing. Because just when I thought the dust had settled, the phone rang one evening while Ethan and I were making spaghetti. It was my dad. Not yelling. Not demanding. Just breathing heavily into the phone like the call itself weighed 50 pounds. Arnold, he said, voice tight. Your mother and I want to talk. I didn't answer right away. I stirred the sauce. Ethan hummed next to me, cutting mushrooms with the blunt kid-safe knife he loved using. What about? I asked finally. He hesitated. Cracked. Deflated. About Christmas, he said. About everything. It wasn't an apology. But it wasn't another order either. It was something else. A tremor in the foundation. A shift. A moment waiting to become a turning point. And I knew, whatever came next, it wouldn't be the conversation they thought they were walking into. My parents chose the park for the talk, which already told me everything. Neutral ground. Public space. A built-in audience to discourage raised voices and hard truths. It was the family equivalent of meeting in a police station lobby. Ethan came with me. It wasn't a visit, it was a conversation, and I didn't hide things from him that involved him. But we agreed on a plan. If it got tense, he'd take the dog for a walk around the pond. He nodded like a tiny secret agent and tucked a granola bar into his pocket. For the mission. My parents were already on the bench when we arrived. My mom stood immediately, arms open halfway like she wanted to hug but wasn't sure she had permission. My dad stayed seated, his posture stiff, jaw tight, baseball cap pulled low like he was shielding himself from consequences. I didn't hug them. I sat. Ethan sat beside me. The dog plopped at his feet. My mom cleared her throat. We wanted to revisit things, she began, hands woven together in her lap. Christmas. The mortgage. Everything. I nodded once, giving her the floor. If she was going to apologize, she needed space to say it without me feeding her the lines. But then she said, We didn't realize how sensitive things were for you. Sensitive. That word. The emotional equivalent of patting someone on the head. I kept my voice calm. It wasn't about me. It was about Ethan. My dad shifted like he'd swallowed a rock. He wasn't the one who bought the iPad, he muttered. He was the one humiliated, I said. My mom's face tightened. No one meant to humiliate him. Intent doesn't erase impact, I said. Especially for kids. Ethan was quiet, but I could feel him listening. His little shoulder pressed against mine. My mom inhaled, braced herself, and said, "We're sorry. Truly." But again, something was off. It wasn't that she didn't mean it. It was that she didn't fully understand it. "We want things to go back to normal," she added. There it was. Normal. The word people use to describe the version of life where you're convenient to them. Normal wasn't healthy for my son, I said. Or for me. My dad finally spoke, voice low and tired. "We depended on you." "I know," I said. "And that was the problem." He frowned like I'd spoken in another language. "Family depends on each other." "No," I said. "Family supports each other. That's different. Support is given, not owed. Dependence is demanded." My mom looked genuinely confused. My dad looked offended. But Ethan looked relieved. Maybe because someone was finally naming what he'd always sensed. Then Dad said something I didn't expect. "We miss him," he said quietly, eyes flicking to Ethan. Not, "We miss you." Not, "We miss your help." "We miss him." Ethan's chin lifted just a little, like he felt the shift too. I let the silence sit. Let them sit in the truth of it. Finally I said, "If you want to be part of Ethan's life, you need to treat him with respect. You need to see him. Not as an accessory. Not as an afterthought. As a person." My mom nodded quickly. "We can do that." But I held up a hand. "It's not a promise you make to me. It's something he decides over time. He'll see it in how you act, not what you say." My dad's eyes dropped. My mom's face fell. Then Ethan, in that soft little voice of his, said, "I like being around people who like having me there." Not angry. Not dramatic. Just honest. My mom covered her mouth. My dad looked away. And for the first time in my entire life, the power in that dynamic shifted, truly shifted. Not because I yelled. Not because I threatened. But because my son spoke a truth so simple and pure it cut through years of entitlement like a blade. I stood. "We'll take things slowly," I said. "But I won't put him back in environments that make him feel small." My parents nodded. Not happy. Not triumphant. Just humbled. Ethan and I walked back to the car, the dog trotting beside him. When we buckled in, he looked at me and said, "Dad, that was kind of scary." "It was," I admitted. "But it was good," he added quietly. And I realized he wasn't just talking about them. He was talking about me. Fall eased in with that soft, golden quiet that makes every evening feel like it's thinking about something. Ethan had started 3rd grade, drawing spaceships on every spare inch of paper. I was back to working normal hours. No emergency money transfers, no panicked calls, no trying to solve crises that weren't mine. Life, for once, felt balanced. But boundaries, once set, don't eliminate people. They just force them to choose how to show up next. And that's exactly what happened. One Saturday in early October, my mom texted asking if she and my dad could stop by. Just to drop something off for Ethan. No guilt, no demands, no mortgage-shaped shadows lurking between the words. I asked Ethan first, "Do you want to see them?" He thought about it, chewing his lip the way he did when he was deciding between bravery and comfort. "Only if they're nice," he said simply. A reasonable condition for any human being. They arrived 20 minutes later. My mom carried a gift bag, not oversized, not extravagant, not a thinly veiled attempt to reopen the financial pipeline. Just a bag with blue tissue paper and unevenly tied ribbon that looked genuinely homemade. My dad stood behind her, oddly still, like he wasn't sure where to put his hands. He used to walk into my house like he owned it. Now he waited for me to open the door fully, a subtle but unmistakable shift. "Hi, sweetheart," my mom said to Ethan, voice careful. Not indulgent. Not dismissive. Careful. Ethan hovered half behind my leg, but he didn't hide. Mom knelt, to hand him the bag. "I saw these at a craft fair," she said, "and I thought of you." Inside the bag was a set of watercolor pencils and a pack of thick art paper. Nothing expensive. Nothing showy. Thoughtful. The kind of gift someone gives when they actually pay attention. Ethan's eyes flicked up at me, asking silently, "Is this safe?" I nodded once. "Thank you," he said, shy but sincere. My dad cleared his throat. "You draw a lot, huh?" Ethan nodded. "I'm making a comic book." Dad blinked, like he hadn't expected his grandson to have interests that were real and detailed and worth acknowledging. "Maybe you can show me one sometime," he said, and it wasn't perfect, but it was genuine. It was something. We invited them in, but only for 10 minutes. Boundaries don't dissolve just because someone brings art supplies. They didn't try to stay longer. They didn't make comments. They didn't prod for money. They just existed, quieter versions of themselves, like they were trying to relearn how to be family without taking. When they left, Ethan sat at the kitchen table, unwrapping his new pencils carefully, one by one, lining them up in order. "Dad?" he said finally. "Yeah?" That was better. It wasn't a glowing endorsement. It wasn't forgiveness. It was an observation. A cautious opening. And honestly, that's all I wanted. Sometimes healing doesn't arrive in apologies. Sometimes it arrives in gentler voices, in shorter visits, in the space people give your child to feel whole. I watched Ethan draw until the sun set, shadows stretching across the table, his pencils arranged like a rainbow someone finally handed him without asking for anything in return. We weren't fixed. We weren't done. But we weren't in the same place we'd been the year before. And for the first time, that felt like progress, not for them, but for us. By November, something strange started happening. My parents began treating Ethan like a person. Not a prop. Not an obligation. Not a shadow of the real grandkids. A person. It started small. My mom sent him a text asking what his favorite cookies were because she wanted to bake some. Just for him. She spelled snickerdoodle wrong twice, but the effort was so sincere I didn't correct her. My dad, who once said he didn't understand why kids draw so much when they don't draw anything real, asked if Ethan wanted to go with him to the hardware store sometime. Not as a test. Not as a chore. As time together. And Ethan, cautiously, carefully, said maybe. But nothing changed overnight. In fact, the biggest test came the week before Thanksgiving. My sister Kara invited the whole family to her place for dinner. A peace offering, allegedly. But peace from Kara always arrived wrapped in barbed wire. I wasn't planning to go. Too soon. Too many landmines. Too many opportunities for old habits to snap back like rubber bands. But then, Ethan asked. "Can we go?" he said quietly. "Just to see if it's different?" He said it with this mixture of hope and bravery only kids have. The kind that isn't naive, it's resilient. So I agreed, but with a plan. 1 hour. 1 car. Walk out the moment anyone crossed the line. We arrived right on time, meaning we were exactly 15 minutes earlier than everyone else, because punctuality in my family is considered an act of aggression. Kara answered the door with a smile so tight it looked painful. Her husband, Mark, stood behind her looking like a man who didn't sign up for any of this but understood he was already a supporting character. "Hey," Kara said. "Come in." I half expected her daughter, the infamous iPad tosser, to be waiting with a new insult locked and loaded. But instead she walked over slowly, hands clasped in front of her, head down. "Hi, Uncle Arnold," she said. "Hi, Ethan." It wasn't enthusiastic, but it wasn't sharp either. Neutral. Maybe even respectful. Then she handed Ethan a wrapped box the size of a paperback book. "It's not a big gift," she said quickly, almost nervously. "Just something for drawing." Ethan opened it carefully. Inside was a pack of metallic gel pens. Simple. Thoughtful. Not extravagant. Not thrown. He looked up at her. "Thank you," he said. She nodded once, relieved. "You're welcome." And for the first time, I saw it, the recognition. The understanding of the hurt she'd caused. Not because anyone lectured her, but because kids see things eventually. They grow. They learn. They recalibrate. Dinner wasn't perfect. My family has never been perfect. They spilled wine. They bickered. They overcooked the chicken. But no one laughed at Ethan. No one minimized him. No one tossed gifts or snorted at his quietness. In fact, something unexpected happened. My mom asked him about his comic book. My dad asked if he wanted to help carve the turkey. Even Kara complimented his drawing of a dragon on a napkin. Small things. Almost insignificant things. But for a child, tiny gestures become entire worlds. Halfway through dinner, Ethan leaned toward me and whispered, "Dad, I don't feel small." That was it. The moment. The thing I had been waiting for without knowing it. We stayed the full hour. Then a second. Because for once, no one tore the piece we'd carefully built. When we left, Ethan walked out holding his new gel pens like treasure. In the car, he said, "It wasn't perfect, but it wasn't bad." "That's all it needed to be," I said. As we drove home through the cold November night, I realized something. People can change. Not easily. Not quickly. Not without being forced to look in the mirror. But they can. And sometimes, the change doesn't come from grand apologies or sweeping transformations. Sometimes it comes from quiet rooms and awkward dinners and gel pens handed to a kid by someone who once threw an iPad. Little shifts. Little repairs. Little moments where the world tilts back into balance. And for the first time in a long time, I felt cautiously, carefully, hopeful. December crept in with that soft, early dark quiet that makes houses feel warmer than they actually are. It had been almost a year since the iPad incident. 12 months of boundaries, repairs, silence, careful reconnection, and the slow, uneven relearning of how a family is supposed to behave. And then one evening, as Ethan and I were unpacking groceries, he asked a question that stopped me mid-can of tomatoes. "Dad, are we doing Christmas with them this year?" Them. Not Grandma and Grandpa. Not the family. Them. A year ago, that word was heavy. Now it was simply honest. I took a moment before I answered. "Do you want to?" Ethan shrugged. "Maybe. If it's like Thanksgiving again. The good parts." I understood exactly what he meant. A room where he wasn't overshadowed. A dinner where he wasn't invisible. A family gathering where he wasn't the afterthought to a spotlight niece and nephew. "I'll talk to them," I said. "But you get final say." That night, I texted my parents and Kara a simple message. "If we do Christmas together, here are the rules. Respect Ethan. No comments about gifts, money, or who gives what. No yelling. We leave the moment anyone crosses a line." The group chat went quiet for a full hour before my mom replied. "We agree. All of us." And surprisingly, no one argued. December 24th arrived with snow, the soft, powdery kind that looks like a movie set designer sprinkled it by hand. Ethan wore the sweater he'd knitted in art club. I wore the one he'd picked for me, navy, slightly itchy, but apparently. "Looks like you'd be in a commercial," according to him. When we walked into my parents' house, the first thing I noticed was the stockings. 4 of them. 2 for my sister's kids, embroidered, fancy, matching. 1 for my parents, side by side. And then 1, hanging in the center, new, deep blue with silver thread. Ethan. Not squeezed onto the edge. Not mismatched. Not an afterthought. Centered. My mother glanced at me, just once, as if to say, "We heard you. We finally heard you." Ethan noticed too. He stopped walking, staring at it like it was a constellation he'd discovered. "For me?" he asked softly. "Yes, sweetheart," my mom said, voice gentle in a way I hadn't heard in years. "We wanted you to have one that was yours." Then came the real surprise. My dad walked over, not gruff, not distant, and held out an envelope to Ethan. "It's not a toy," he said awkwardly. "It's something else." Ethan opened it. Inside was a folded piece of paper. A hand-drawn blueprint, rough, messy, definitely not made by me, of a drawing desk. Measurements. Notes. A signature that looked like it had been erased and redone twice. "I want to build this with you," my dad said. "If you want." The silence was so soft you could hear the house settle. Ethan's voice trembled. "With me?" My dad nodded. "With you." And there it was, the gesture no iPad, no mixer, no expensive anything had ever managed. Time. Respect. Effort. The currency my family had ignored for years. Dinner was simple. Less fancy. More human. My niece didn't toss anything. My nephew actually asked Ethan about his comic book. Kara didn't make a single snide comment, possibly a world record. At one point, as my parents cleared the table, Kara lingered beside me. "You know," she said quietly, "I didn't get it before. I thought you were overreacting. But watching how they treat him now..." She swallowed, surprising herself with honesty. "I understand. I really do. I didn't say thank you. I didn't say it's okay. I just nodded. Because sometimes acknowledgement, not forgiveness, is the real turning point." On the drive home, snow drifted around the headlights like glitter. Ethan held the blueprint in his lap like it was the most fragile treasure on earth. "Dad?" he said. "Yeah, buddy?" This Christmas felt like we belong. I felt my throat tighten. "Yeah," I said. "We do." And as the snow kept falling, something settled quietly inside me, a truth that had been growing all year. Sometimes you don't fix a broken family. Sometimes you rebuild the parts worth keeping. And sometimes, miraculously, they learn to rebuild themselves. That night, after Ethan fell asleep clutching the blueprint, I stood in the doorway of his room, watching his chest rise and fall in that soft, steady rhythm that anchors your entire world. A year ago, he'd whispered, "Did I do something wrong?" Now he'd gone to bed believing he belonged. And that was the ending I wanted, not loud, not dramatic. Just this: my son safe, seen, and finally home.